I had a pretty normal childhood growing up. I played soccer. I was in the band. I met a girl, and after 10 years of dating, we ended up getting married. And after school, I started working as a programmer at a pharmaceutical company. And after a couple of years of that, I actually started my own business. And that business was revolved around creating technology solutions for healthcare. And it was a pretty sweet gig. I traveled the world, actually, interviewing oncologists at the time, and finding out the state of affairs of oncology and what was going on with that. And as I poured more effort and time into starting this new business, I put on weight. And I was getting older, and the more weight I put on, the worse I felt. So I started feeling poorly, and I attributed feeling poorly to getting older and putting on weight. So I was about 200 pounds in this photo here. And unfortunately, it wasn't just weight and age. Something really was wrong. And after several months of searching for an answer of why I was feeling so poorly, finally, doctors did some abdominal surgery on me just to open up and see what was going on inside. And they found a grapefruit-sized tumor in my intestine. And after I woke up from the surgery, my surgeon and my family were gathered around my bed, and they said, "Derek, we're sorry to tell you, but you have cancer. You have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma." So I recovered from my surgery, and I'm in my oncologist's office for the first time for my first treatment of chemotherapy. And my doctor sits me down. He said, "Derek, let me tell you a little bit about chemotherapy." And I said, "Sure, I've never been on the side of it." He said, "Picture yourself as an airplane flying high through the sky." I'm like, "Okay, that's nice." He said, "Now picture that airplane's on fire." And I said, "Oh, okay." He said, now the flames are your cancer. And through a flood of toxins, which we call chemotherapy, we're going to put that plane into a medically controlled nosedive. And through the sheer velocity of pointing your plane directly at Earth, we're hopefully going to put out all those flames. And it's my job, Derek, as your oncologist, to be the pilot of that plane and to know exactly when to pull back on that stick before you hit the ground and pull you out of that nosedive and take you back up to a cruising altitude. And with that, we'll dust you off, we'll check you out, we'll make sure that all the flames have gone out and we've gotten rid of all the cancer. And if we haven't, well, we'll do it again. And so for 5 months, I went through that. And after 5 months, I was declared in remission. And so my wife and I kind of breathed that collective sigh of relief. And so I went back to work. And at this point, we had moved, the company that I had started had expanded and broadened. And we had gone from oncology to cardiology. And we were delivering technology solutions via email and the web. And it was an incredible time, and I was having a great time doing it. And that lasted for about 3 months. I started having difficulty breathing. And so after many sleepless nights and late trips to the ER in the middle of the night, I was finally visited by a new doctor, and he comes to my bedside, and he says, "Derek, I understand that you've had a pretty rough year." He said, I'm afraid I've got some more bad news. Your chemotherapy treatment damaged your heart. You have heart failure." And that was something. Now, I would describe having heart failure at the time as having a 10-pound weight hanging from each lung. It wasn't that much more difficult to breathe. Your body adapts to it, and you move forward. What I didn't understand at the time was that a little bit more weight was being added every day, and my body was adapting to that burden. And so for 7 years, I would go through this, and I would have these episodes, and I described it as like being a boxer in the 12th round of a heavyweight fight. I would get dizzy spells. My hands would go just limp. I couldn't lift them. And my head, I would just get dizzy, and my head would get very heavy. So I would go through these things, and over the following 7 years, those episodes got worse and worse and longer in duration. Ultimately, what happened was that I go to my doctor for a routine checkup. I go to my cardiologist, and while I'm waiting in the examination room, I collapse. This was around probably December of 2010, and at that point, my doctor says, "All right, you're being admitted," and I was admitted into the hospital for my heart failure, and there was really only one cure for my condition. I was running out of treatment options, but there was really only one cure, and that was a transplant. Just to put into perspective, leading causes of death in the United States, according to the CDC, I just pulled some stats off the web. Number 2 being cancer, and you can see there, between 500 and 550,000 people died every year between 2003 and 2011, which was pretty much the duration I went through this process. And then the number 1, of course, being heart failure. Those two combined, just to give you an idea of the odds and what my excellent healthcare providers were doing for me, those two combined killed just under 11 million people within that period that I was going through my treatments. But January 3rd, 2011, I received my gift of life. I received my heart transplant. And I remember waking up from surgery and seeing my wife, and I have tubes coming out of my mouth. I've got tubes coming out of my torso. While I was going through my decline, my company had actually expanded some more technology, and we were now delivering healthcare solutions on an iPad. So it was always there with me. So I couldn't talk. I had the tubes coming out of my mouth. And so I'm texting on the iPad to my wife. She's talking to me. And while I'm talking to her, coming out of surgery, I just had this annoying thud, just really annoying, just in the back of my head, and I couldn't place it at first. And all of a sudden, we're talking, and then it hits me. That annoying thud was my own heartbeat, or actually someone else's heartbeat beating inside me. And I had forgotten that at one time I had been healthy enough to actually, lie down on a pillow and hear my heartbeat. So it was an overwhelming experience, and one that I knew that I had an incredible responsibility to this person, this anonymous donor that saved my life, because I know that while my family was crying tears of joy, there was another family out there undergoing incredible loss. With that responsibility, which I took extremely seriously, I got up. The day before my transplant, I couldn't walk 20 feet. And in fact, people would just come to my bedside, because I didn't know that they were there anymore, and they would just cry. The day after the transplant, I'm doing laps around the floor, the hospital wing, with my walker. And the physical implications of a heart transplant, it's very similar to, it's almost the equivalent of being hit by a truck. I was on 40 plus meds a day of extremely high dosages. I had post-transplant diabetes. My steroid levels were cranked up so high that it raised my blood glucose levels. I was going through physical therapy. I was on a cardiac and diabetic diet. And my doctors laid out for me a 5-year plan of monitoring, tests, and all these things that would help me manage my condition. And they would come in and have teaching examples of what I needed to do to survive. And so they provided me with this 3-ring binder of all the information that I needed to track on a day-to-day basis. I'm looking at this binder, and this is how you live from here on out. And it's extremely overwhelming and terrifying. And I look at them, and my technology brain kicks in. And I look at them and I go, you know I can do this better, right? And they're like, no, 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 listen, listen. This is a tried and true practice. We know what we have here works. Don't do anything differently. I said, okay. So I went about and built something on my iPad anyway, and it was something that needed to track. And what did it need to track? Well, it needed to track my vitals. It needed to track wound care. It needed to track my medications, my nutrition, my weight control, my exercise, my emotional states, and then my physiological states. And then it needed to deliver all that information back to my transplant team so they could evaluate it and then tell me what to do from there. January of 2011. Now, you can see in this picture here, I started losing weight. At one point, I'd been 200 pounds. Just before transplant, I was about 155 pounds. And in the months following transplant, because I was on a cardiac and diabetic diet and just the physical damage that takes, I was 128 pounds. So this is still me at 135 pounds. So I was wearing 3 t-shirts and wearing a sweatshirt just to seem like I had some kind of mass to me. But I was so weak throughout January of that year that I would spend it on my back, unable. I didn't have the neck muscles to lift my head off of the pillow. Now, if someone literally lifted me out of bed, I could stagger to my feet and I'd walk around and I'd exercise. If no one was around, well, then I'd scooch my rear end off the bed, fall to the floor, and I would crawl from one side of my bedroom to the other. And that's how I started training. A few months later, I actually went to cardiac rehab. And so the first time I got into a treadmill, I thought I was going to jostle my heart so much that it was going to fall out of my pants leg. But that didn't happen. And so with them, I went from a shuffle to a walk, and from a walk to a jog. And so one day, I'm on this treadmill, and I'm jogging 30 seconds. I'm feeling really good, and I had never done 30 seconds before up to that point. And so I look at my therapist, and I was like, you think I can pick up the pace a little bit? He's like, you're okay, just don't overdo it. So I pick up the pace. And I'm like, this feels amazing. I feel something going on. I didn't know what it was. And I was afraid that they were going to tell me to stop. So when my therapist wasn't looking, he was working with another patient, I picked up the pace again. And with that, as soon as that happened, my feet got light. And my chest expanded, and my shoulders moved back. And I got goosebumps all over my arms and the back of my neck. And for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of what I can only describe as a runner's high. And with that runner's high, all these memories of what it felt like to be healthy, to feel healthy, came flooding back into my mind because I had forgotten what it felt like. And I knew that all I wanted to do was to feel strong enough to feel more of that. I went from cardiac rehab, I put a treadmill in my basement, and I'm running downstairs. Oh, and the other thing, physically, I'm going through my iPad. I'm checking off all of the things that I'm tracking. And after 3 months, I eliminated the need for the steroids. I kicked the diabetes. And so I'm on the treadmill in my basement. My wife comes down, she looks at me with that look, and she's like, you're not going to become one of those guys, are you, right? You get a second or third chance at life, and all of a sudden starts running marathons. And I said, no, listen, I don't like being around that many people. I don't have the short shorts. It's not going to happen. So 2 months later, I was in my first 5K. That was 8 months post-transplant. 2 months after that, I competed in my first half marathon. And so I started with triathlon in 2012. I learned to bike and swim. I met other heart transplant athletes. And with a bunch of them, we created a team called Tin Men Endurance Racing that we can use to generate awareness and celebrate life through sport. That's the Tin Men there. And then in July of 2013, I did something that obviously the title of my talk would allude to. And I went to Lake Placid, New York. I went to the Adirondacks, and I competed in an Ironman. And just so that you're aware, an Ironman is a 2.4-mile swim, followed by a 112-mile bike ride, followed by a 26.2-mile run. You have to finish it in 17 hours or less, or it doesn't count. And at the end of that day, I became the first and only cancer survivor / heart transplant recipient to ever complete a full Ironman. Thank you. Now, physically, one of the great benefits of being so active has been the fact that I started nerve regeneration to the new heart. And my doctors were amazed. They said that if I was ever going to achieve nerve regeneration, if at all, it wouldn't be until at least 5 years out. My nerves started regenerating within the first year post-transplant. And that was all part of the process, but the most amazing thing and the most important thing that's happened to me since the 3.5 years since my transplant. We spent 13 years trying to get pregnant. And so this past January, Emma Fitzgerald was born, and so she is the light of my life, the light of my wife's life. And when you think about the gift of life that I receive from my donor, it's truly been the gift that has kept on giving. After cancer, heart failure, heart transplant, and diabetes, what is my life like now? Well, I train 7 days a week. Triathlon, you name it. I've competed in over 65 endurance events. And I've swam or biked or ran over 7,100 miles. Just to put that into perspective, that's like leaving Florida, going to Washington State, and then going back. And obviously, the most important achievement since that transplant has been that girl right there. So I attribute all of this to the healthcare providers, my doctors, my nurses, having the right tools with me in order to manage my conditions, and having the right coaches in place, having the families, having my family support and my friend support has been crucial, and of course, luck, determination, and oh yeah, that 5-year prognosis that my doctors had given me, I actually left at 2 years. So they basically said, Derek, you're good. Just come on back. We'll look at you. We're not going to poke you. A lot of people ask me about my donor, if I know anything about my donor, and I don't. I wrote a letter 6 months post-transplant, and my donor's family declined to respond, and I certainly understand that. But what I do take from my donor is the fact that on probably the worst and the last day of their life, they chose to save the life of a complete stranger. And to me, that speaks to a level of generosity, of honor, and integrity that I use as the rudder that guides my way through this life. I thank you for listening. Wish you all the best. Thank you very much.